The story begins at Lincoln High School, where a quiet, observant black teenager named Malik Henderson is wrongly arrested and accused of an armed robbery he didn't commit. His sketchbook, a symbol of his talent and voice, is left on the street as police slam him onto the concrete. Despite his innocence and the fact that he was scanning artwork at the library, Malik is charged and denied bail. His public defender fails to provide an adequate defense, while the judge, Barrett Royce, moves the trial along with alarming speed. The trial is riddled with procedural misconduct. Witness testimonies are vague, forensic evidence is manipulated, and crucial alibi footage from traffic cameras is suppressed. Elena Vasquez, a court clerk, notices irregularities and quietly begins gathering evidence. Meanwhile, Malik's estranged father, Langston Pryor, the U.S. Attorney General, receives a desperate call from his son and begins to investigate the case. Langston uncovers disturbing patterns in Judge Royce's record, revealing systemic bias and financial ties to private prisons. He enlists a small, loyal team to dig deeper, discovering doctored surveillance footage, forged forensic reports, and a network of shell companies tied to Royce and a tech contractor manipulating digital evidence. Malik, imprisoned and facing life without parole, finds solace and power in drawing portraits of fellow inmates, capturing their humanity and forming connections. His artwork reaches the outside world through a prison art program, sparking public outcry. Meanwhile, Elena, under increasing pressure and threats, bravely shares documents proving judicial misconduct. Langston uses the evidence to launch a federal investigation, resigning from his position to testify publicly before the Senate Judiciary Committee. His testimony, supported by statistical analyses, whistleblower accounts, and Malik's artwork, shakes the justice system. The committee votes to investigate Judge Royce. News spreads nationwide. Protests erupt. Art installations project Malik's drawings onto courthouses. Public opinion shifts as other victims come forward. Judge Royce is suspended. Malik's case is reopened, now overseen by the fair and respected Judge Martinez. In court, Malik's legal team methodically dismantles the prosecution's case, presenting the altered evidence, suppressed footage, and forged forensics. Elena's testimony, expert analysis, and Malik's drawings expose the truth. The courtroom is captivated, and Malik's innocence becomes undeniable. Langston and Malik meet again, no words needed to express what has been lost and reclaimed. As Malik is exonerated, he walks out not just as a free man, but as the face of a movement for justice reform. His art, once a silent cry, becomes a national voice demanding change. The story ends with a commitment from leaders and communities to re-examine cases affected by systemic bias, sparked by one teenager's drawings and a father's redemption. Part 6. The verdict. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, activists, law students, even retired judges had come to witness what had become the most talked-about retrial in a decade. Elena Vasquez sat in the front row, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Just behind her sat Langston Pryor, no longer the U.S. Attorney General, but still a formidable presence. He looked over at his son, seated next to his new defense attorney, Sylvia Hammond, a sharp, relentless legal mind who had once clerked for the Supreme Court. Malik's hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie. He had grown leaner but stronger, his eyes deeper, wiser. "Your Honor," Sylvia began her closing argument, "this case is not simply about a miscarriage of justice. It is about the systemic corrosion of truth. The evidence against my client was not only circumstantial, it was orchestrated." She turned to the jury. He was not convicted for what he did. He was convicted for who he was. Judge Martinez's gavel echoed. The jury will now deliberate. It took only 90 minutes. Malik stood, heart pounding. When the foreperson read the words, "We find the defendant, Malik Henderson, not guilty," there was a moment of suspended silence. Then a roar of applause broke out in the courtroom. People stood, clapped, cried. Langston crossed the courtroom and pulled his son into a tight embrace. But Malik's eyes were locked on Judge Martinez, who nodded solemnly. Justice had been served, but his journey was just beginning. Part 7. The aftermath. Malik didn't disappear into anonymity. Instead, he stepped straight into the storm. His first public address was broadcast nationally from the steps of the Lincoln County Courthouse. "There are thousands like me," he said into the microphone, flanked by Langston and Elena. Thousands who didn't get second trials. I'm here today because people fought for me. But this fight isn't over. He announced the creation of the Henderson Project, a nonprofit dedicated to auditing wrongful convictions and holding judges accountable. Elena became the director of judicial ethics under the new administration. Langston returned to public service, this time not as a prosecutor, but as a reform advocate in the Senate. And Malik? He continued to paint. His portraits of inmates, activists, children of incarcerated parents toured galleries across the country. One of his most famous pieces, titled Still Human, was a haunting, soft-shaded charcoal sketch of an elderly man behind bars, staring into the light through a barred window. But the story didn't end there. Part 8. The Confrontation. In a final twist that shocked the nation, a secret whistleblower from within a digital forensics company approached the Henderson Project with damning files, recordings, and data logs proving Judge Royce had ordered direct manipulation of multiple cases. With this new evidence, Royce was rearrested, not just for Malik's case, but for a pattern of abuse spanning over 12 years. The trial was public. Royce's own voice was played in court. I don't care what the kid did. He fits the profile. Put him away. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Royce was convicted on federal charges of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and abuse of power. He was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison, the very system he once twisted now consuming him. Part 9. The Closure. A year later, Malik stood once again in the courtroom, this time not as a defendant, but as a keynote speaker. I was told I'd never walk free, he said. But I walk today not for vengeance, but for justice. For those still waiting. For those unheard. Outside the courthouse, a young boy approached him, clutching a sketch pad. Mr. Henderson, I draw too. Malik knelt and smiled. Then don't stop. Your art can change the world. The cameras faded. The applause quieted. But the ripple he had started, across prisons, courtrooms, classrooms, was just beginning. Malik Henderson was no longer a name associated with injustice. He was a movement. And justice finally had a face.